Powercreep. This is my Arknights account. I have a lot of 6 stars, many of them are unbuilt. We don't talk about the potentials on some of them. And a lot of 5 stars who I do legitimately like. But today is not about the 6 stars, 5 stars, or even the respective banners for the game itself. I actually want to talk about Powercreep. Not just in Arknights, but in Genshin Impact, in Honkai Star Rail, etc. Because I legitimately believe it's an important topic to talk about, especially with how it can impact your overall experience. And more specifically, in my case, how it's impacted mine. In the background, we're going to be doing ZT8 simply because I need the devices. Speaking bluntly, I feel like Powercreep is a very difficult thing to talk about because there's the direct type in that 2 units basically do the exact same thing, except one is so clearly better, or at least has so minimal drawbacks, that the concept of them being the same ranking or of the same scale is kind of redundant. An example could be the case of somebody having the ability to deal damage very similar or comparable to somebody like Searcher without any of the respective downsides she has, such as, her skill 3 kind of killing her. In HSR or Genshin's case, it just, relatively speaking, it is just damage. It is a character who deals extremely high damage with minimal downsides. And whilst it is usually the direct form of Powercreep of an individual character doing the exact same thing but better, you also have functionality, or in other ways, a character who does something extremely new and unique. An example in Genshin's case is like Nahida, a character who is extremely good, but in many ways necessary for certain teams to function really well. You also have different gameplay aspects. You could have, for example, being a character in HSR like Acheron who has access to very good and very easily accessible relics or crit stats. Or in Genshin's case, elemental reactions with Dendro being much more high damaging than other ones like Vape, Melt, and so on. And regardless of that circumstance, I think it is important to discuss because I do think it can impact your experience with the game. If you feel like your characters are losing significant value, or maybe you're being pushed down a path under which you feel like you have to pull for a set character or a set type of roster, it can very heavily impact your overall experience in the sense that it can make you not enjoy the game. It can make you not enjoy or want to pull for new characters. Maybe you don't want to hyper invest into the units you already have, maybe because you, yes, like them, but know there may be power crept in the future. And I think that there's 2 ways to approach this. You can approach it via the metric of, yeah, I don't care because, long story short, it doesn't necessarily impact or change the way I play the game. That is perfectly fine if the game itself supports that idea. As in, if the game is not balancing itself around those future characters, then that is fine. I feel like Genshin does this pretty well, but in HSR's case, maybe not so much because a lot of the content, MOC, and for example, Pure Fiction are very heavily geared towards the on-banner character that is usually stronger than the past characters. In Arknight's case, I feel like there is a variety of units, and while some may be incredibly strong, multiple units can fulfill the same role, or you could have multiple units who essentially even out to that brand new unit or that new scale of power. This could be, yes, a unit like Ayala is incredibly strong as a healer, specifically her alternate variation, which you're seeing on screen now, or you could just use an AoE medic, or an alternative medic. You could use 2 single target ones. It really just depends on what you're actively going for. But then there's the alternative, which is power creep that inherently changes the way you have to play the game via the metric of you feel like if you don't pull for X character or you don't pull for Y character, or whatever, it could be a light cone in HSR's case or a weapon, you inherently feel like your gameplay experience is significantly reduced. Not necessarily just by the metric of you having to match this new scale of power, but you not getting access to new forms of functionality, new reactions, and things like that. Whichever method you prescribe to, because I've had individuals and known individuals who've quit games like HSR because they feel like the power creep is very, very prevalent and a bit too much, and you've also had the opposite effect. I think that it's also important to consider that the discussion of power creep in of itself can inherently change a new player's perspective on the game. If you're approaching and getting into a game and subsequently all you hear about is how bad the power creep is, whether that's true or not doesn't matter because you as a new player don't have that necessary context. You haven't played the game long enough to know who's strong and who's not, or what makes a strong operator, or maybe to know that yes, this character is strong, but they have a specific niche in which they're actually used for. If an operator, unit, character, whatever is good, but they're only good within the context of they're a boss killer or they're meant for single target damage as opposed to multi-target damage, that gives an entirely new perspective and angle on what could just be reviewed as a strong unit. If everybody's saying a unit is strong, you don't have context for what does that really mean in the overall gameplay experience that they already have. But if all you're hearing about is how new units are so much better than older units, you might be in a position to where you're like, well, why would I pull for any of the older units now? Even if you like them, you aren't going to pull for them because 9 times out of 10, they aren't necessarily what you want, or you don't feel like they're going to provide you with enough value to be worthwhile. And if you do skip all of the older characters, all of the new rerun banners, your account may be in a worse position strictly because you don't have anyone. As a result of skipping all the units that you perceived as bad as a result of new units being stronger, you lack any damage, any healers, any supports, because you were so fixated on those future units that now you don't have your current roster built up. Or maybe you hate the game as a result because you are playing with characters you don't like, because the characters you do like you thought were bad by comparison. I don't necessarily like the concept of just a unit being outright stronger, and I do think that usually it's a lot more nuanced than that. Yes, you can have a unit who just deals more damage, and if all you're looking at is the perspective of X character deals damage, then yeah, power creep can be a thing. But under what circumstances are you actively looking at that? Are you looking at how strong a unit is by themselves, or how strong a unit is with buffs? How much do buffs matter to them? If you can hypothetically buff a unit up, whether that be with someone like Bennett in Genshin, or Warfarin skill 2 in Arknights, or maybe you're looking at how much can somebody benefit from Sparkle in HSR. If a unit has high damage on their own, but can't take advantage of buffs, that can dramatically change your perspective on them. Because yeah, they're already strong, sure, but they don't benefit from anything to a degree like any of your already existing units. If you can hypothetically buff an existing character who you like and already have built up more than you can this brand new DPS, then the question becomes, well, how much is that damage difference then? Especially if the unit that you already like is not only invested into, but subsequently works better with the rest of your roster than this new one. I think hearing about Powercreep can inherently change your opinion, yes, but I do think it's not necessarily just a one-size-fits-all scenario. It's not necessarily just something as easily clarifiable as X unit is stronger, therefore they're better. If X unit has more restrictions, but is stronger, then yes, it's something to consider. But if a unit can't take advantage of the rest of your roster, or maybe doesn't fit with your current playstyle, that's also something to consider. Because yeah, if raw damage and raw supportive capability is all you're looking at, cool. Then I can understand the metric of, yeah, this character is a bit too strong or too busted. But I think for the vast majority of individuals, the functionality and flexibility of a unit matters a lot more than just their raw strengths. In the case of HSR, Jingliu can take advantage of crit and or attack buffs as well as somebody like Acheron. Sealy has an entire team that works with her over somebody like Blade. In Genshin Impact, you can have really good characters who are really strong on their own, such as Eula, but they can't take advantage of many attack buffers or are really restrictive in their team setups. And yes, while games can sort of match the on-banner character or match the new scale or level of DPSs, it's not necessarily to say you can't match that. You could skip out on a couple banners and with enough investment match up to that. That's usually the case in most games. Yes, some characters may give you a better start, but not to a degree under which you feel like it might be necessary to actively pull for this brand new character. But that's just me. I really want to hear your opinions down below. I kind of rambled here. I legitimately enjoy this continuous auto operation system. It's great, but you know, I want to hear your opinions. I can't speak as heavily on Arknights Powercreep simply because I am relatively early game, or mid game, I suppose. But in regards to Genshin and HSR, I can speak pretty heavily on them. I played them since launch, so I want to know your perspectives. Either way, I'll see you next time.